Delegate Charkoudian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, colleagues. Good to see you again. For the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian asking for a favorable report on House Bill 70. This bill is very similar to a bill that we passed last year that, Mr. Chair, did die in the Senate. But it is a little bit different, and I know we have new committee members, so I will walk through all of it. What I want you to think about is state highways, and of course, state highways sometimes are the big state highways that are, have divided highways, and then other times they are the roads that are going through our communities. And so depending on what part of the state you represent, you may have more or less of the state highways going through your community. But what we do know is that far too many people die being hit by cars crossing state highways in the state. And so despite the fact that we have had this commitment to Vision Zero for a number of years now, the number of pedestrian fatalities, the number of bicycle fatalities, and the number of pedestrian and bicycle injuries on state highways continues to go up. And so what we finally come to is an understanding that we have to essentially change the rules under which the State Highway Administration is implementing the programs that they have. And so what I've done after tragically having specific areas in my community where I have lost a community member to traffic violence, walked that same strip with the State Highway Administration, lost another community in that community member in that exact same strip, walked it again with State Highway, and then lost a third community member in the exact same place. I've decided that we really need to not just do the individual advocacy that we all do on our state highways, asking for crosswalks and lights and so on, but really sort of change the rules and change the structure. And that's what this bill attempts to do. So one of the things, so it does that in a couple of ways. One of the things it does is it says the state already has context-driven guidelines. The state highways context-driven guidelines are excellent best practices of where you would put safe crosswalks, where you would put stop signs, where you would put all these things. And yet we see the State Highway Administration come in, do a road repaving, and not implement any of their own guidelines in that, and miss this opportunity to create safety there. First part of the bill requires that they do that whenever they're doing a capital project. The second thing that we see is because some roads have been designed for through traffic, whenever they analyze that road in terms of both their context-driven guidelines and traffic flow alone, they repeatedly look at the same roads, the roads where people keep getting killed, and say, there's no way that we can put in additional crosswalks here. And so we've asked them to change that analysis. At the end of the bill, you'll see this section that really asks them to change that analysis, to do a different kind of analysis that figures out how could we put crosswalks in these places that are really more consistent with what we need. There's a strip in my district, I suspect you have some too, where it is very, very dense, very traffic dependent. There's 3/4 of a mile between where you can cross safely. And I've been out there with the State Highway Administration, and they tell me what they expect people to do is to walk an extra half mile out of their way to get across the street to the bus stop. It's just not gonna happen, and so people are gonna die. And so this requires an analysis and a report on what would it cost to do that differently, so we can then take that report and figure out what requirements we want to put on them. The second thing that we know, the third thing that we know is that the low pay in a lot of state highway, these jobs that do this work has led to, along with a number of other things, empty positions, and that's been another thing that's caused the delays. So there's a section in here related to that. I do want to say that it's been a pleasure to work with the new administration, having an SHA and an MDOT working with me on this bill, and so for the first time I have constructive feedback from them. You probably saw some of it. I'm working with them to incorporate a lot of those amendments, and so there will be ultimately some changes once this gets to subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to hear from Franz Schneiderman, and we're going to hear from all the advocates, and then we'll go to question. Oh, hello, Courtney. And then we'll go to questions. So, who'd like to go first? Actually, it doesn't have to be Franz, but okay. Well, sure. Then it's Franz.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Barbe, Vice Chair Stein, members of the committee, for the opportunity to address the bill. My name's Franz Schneiderman. I work with a group called Consumer Auto Maryland. It's all that works for safety, fairness, and transparency for Maryland drivers and road users. And, you know, we support this bill strongly because it really should make a difference for safety, both for the most vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cyclists, but also for everyone on our roads. Road safety is always a concern, but the problem has gotten a lot worse in recent years, and over the last couple decades, the trends have been in the wrong direction. There was a huge spike in fatalities during the pandemic, but it's not just that. Over the last 10 years or more, fatalities among pedestrians are way up. Fatalities among cyclists are up 58% nationally between 2010 and 2021. And the important thing is it really doesn't have to be that way. In other developed, wealthy countries, rates of traffic fatalities have gone way down in the last 20, 30 years, but that's not the case in this country. And the reason is, there are a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is we haven't done the kind of design changes, we haven't invested money and resources and time in that we've seen much more in other developed nations. We know that about 73% of the pedestrian deaths come on major arterial roads, that is, high-speed, high-capacity roads through urban and suburban areas. And about 67% of the pedestrian deaths come on roadways where there's no protected space for pedestrians. The great thing about this bill is that, we know how to fix some of this because road engineers understand these problems and how to address them with design changes, and the bill mandates that we SHA act to do so, particularly in town centers and the most dangerous areas. So, by protecting the most vulnerable pedestrians and cyclists, it works to protect everybody on the road. And we ask you for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? What's your name, sir?
Do I need to press a button?
You're good.
No, don't press.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Timothy Ernst. I'm here to support HB 70, the Safe Roads Act. My family lives near Georgia Avenue, Maryland Route 97, statistically the most dangerous road in Montgomery County if you are a pedestrian. Here's a partial list of pedestrians killed just in the past few years. 49-year-old Ramon Sanchez was killed August 1, 2018 by a car while trying to cross Georgia Avenue at Veers Mill Road. 9 days later, 56-year-old Alberto Hilario was killed by an automobile while crossing Georgia Avenue near Glen Allen Avenue. 4 days after that, 41-year-old Mauricio Carrera was killed at Georgia Avenue and Reedy Drive near the Wheaton Metro Station. In April 2021, Claire Grossman was killed by a Toyota Camry while crossing Georgia Avenue near Rippling Brook Drive. Mrs. Grossman, age 65, had just gotten off a bus from work. Mrs. Grossman did not own a car. She relied on public transportation to get around. 5 years earlier, Mrs. Grossman's husband, Robert Grossman, was killed by an automobile while he was crossing Georgia Avenue. About 1,000 feet away from the spot his wife was killed. In April 2022, 1 year ago, Eric F. Grossi died after being hit by a vehicle while crossing Tuckerman Lane in North Bethesda. Age 74, Rick Grossi was my cousin. He was a devoted husband, father, and grandfather. 3 years earlier, in 2019, a pedestrian named Jennifer DeMauro, age 31, was killed at the same intersection as my cousin in North Bethesda. I recently participated in a community walk along Georgia Avenue with my council member and Delegate Vaughn Stewart, a member of this committee.
If you could begin to wrap up your testimony,
Yes.
the committee would appreciate that.
Thank you. We watched senior citizens trying to cross 6 lanes of traffic to get to the bus stop. There was not a crosswalk or a traffic signal anywhere in sight. Many of our neighbors use public transportation. They cannot afford private vehicles. This is a safety issue and it's an equity issue.
Thank you very much.
I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Priscilla Kania, are you with us? You are. Come right on up. You're the next contestant.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Chairman. Again, I spoke a little bit earlier on behalf of 850,000 AARP members. I'm Priscilla Cania, an AARP volunteer advocate. Just like everybody else said, this is such a big issue, especially for senior citizens. Everybody should feel safe crossing a street, but the streets can be dangerous. And as I said before, the number of pedestrians killed by vehicles has risen by 35% in the past decade, and that death rate is twice as high for people over 75 as the general population. Making streets safe has been an important issue for AARP. This issue is of critical importance to our members. When older Marylanders don't feel safe crossing the street, they are less engaged and less active. AARP has included pedestrian safety as one of the measures of our quality of life on our livability index, and we invite you to check out how well your city does. I can tell you Anne Arundel County is at a 54% out of 100. You can check this out at AARP Livability Index. You'll also be able to see how your area stacks up for housing, environment, health, convenience, and opportunity. Safe streets and roads are important to all of us. Many of us walk and we drive, but we use walkers, canes, and even push our grandkids in strollers. Drivers should share the roads, and roads should be safe for all. Help us make America's streets safer for everyone. And I ask you to please give this a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have two witnesses who wish to testify virtually. So let me call first Christy Daphnis. Christy, are you with us?
I sure am.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of HB 70. I'm Christy Daphnis from Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets. While the state is committed to Vision Zero, we haven't made significant progress in preventing deaths. There are intersections and corridors where pedestrians and cyclists are killed again and again and again, yet the infrastructure changes and meaningful safety actions are stalled or non-existent. I got involved in road safety advocacy after my child's care provider, Izu, was killed crossing Georgia Avenue in 2011, a block from where the Grossmans were killed. She was on the way home from her evening nursing class, crossing legally at an unmarked crosswalk near a bus stop, struck by a speeding driver. To cross safely, she would have needed to walk a full mile out of her way, with the nearest traffic light over a half mile away. Had there been a safe crossing closer to the bus stop, Izu may still be alive today. The 5th mile crossing distances, among other interventions offered in this bill, could have saved her life. Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets aims to support traffic violence victims and families while advocating for laws and safer infrastructure. We plan and carry out memorials for traffic crash victims across Montgomery County and have planned dozens over the past 3 years, many of which Delegate Charkoudian has attended herself. In general, the names and faces of these victims are long forgotten by lawmakers and decision makers. And we see the same situation time and time again, areas where there are no safe crossings along transit-dependent corridors dotted with bus stops, businesses, and highly dense residential areas. In some cases, we've returned to the same intersections or corridors 3, 4, 5, even 6 times as the death count rises and our neighbors are killed in the same spots along our state highways. Passage and implementation of this bill would lead to a more fulsome analysis and implementation of the state-issued context-driven design guide, as well as a thoughtful process for installing safe crossings. Passage of this bill would prompt action versus empty words and platitudes of Vision Zero. If passed and implemented, this bill will certainly save lives. I urge you to report favorably in support of HB 70. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. And the final witness, Lee Walton. And there she is. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair and Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Leah Walton, and I am a safety advocate for the National Transportation Safety Board. The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged by Congress to investigate all civil aviation accidents, as well as other major transportation disasters in other modes, to determine the probable cause and issue safety recommendations to prevent future tragedies from occurring. In 2018, the NTSB released a special investigation report looking at pedestrian safety. In this report, we issued safety recommendations that dealt with vehicle-based safety countermeasures, infrastructure planning, and improved pedestrian safety data. One of the, one of the safety recommendations pertaining to infrastructure planning is to the Federal Highway Administration. which reads, expand support of state and local safety projects beyond focus cities to promote municipal pedestrian safety action plans that develop a network of safety improvements. While this recommendation was issued to the Federal Highway Administration, our safety recommendations can be adopted or used as a best practice to improve safety by a state on its own. Protect vulnerable road users through a safe system approach is on the NTSB's most wanted list of transportation safety improvements. A safe system addresses all aspects of traffic safety: road users, vehicles, speeds, infrastructure, and post-crash care. States must make better safety investments, from pedestrian safety action plans and road treatments to strong traffic safety laws and robust education efforts to mitigate injury risks for all road users. The Safe Roads Act of 2023 will help Maryland create a safe system for all road users. Thank you for allowing me to share the NTSB perspective.
Thank you very much. And we have a couple of questions. Let's go to them. First question goes to Delegate Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Charkoudian, for this bill. I like it. The question that I have is, and Mr. Schneiderman kind of hit on it in his testimony. When plans, construction plans are designed for highway construction, et cetera, they have to meet the design criteria for the jurisdiction. When an engineering firm designs a state highway or a plan for a state highway or Anne Arundel County or Prince George's County, they have to be designed per the standards of that criteria, like SHA has their own criteria. If an engineering firm submits a set of plans that don't meet the criteria, they're sent back to the engineering firm and denied permit. So the question is, and I see NTSB is in favor of the bill as well, and that's great. I think your bill might help current roadway systems, but no future roadway systems, in my opinion, is going to be addressed like this bill does for current roadway systems unless the design standards are changed. So have you contacted, State Highway or at NTSB or the Professional Engineer Society or someone to help revise the design standards? Because if you don't do that, everything must be constructed the same way it is now.
Thank you for that question. So I think it's my understanding that there's a couple of different sets of standards that are out there. So I want to make sure I understand. And when you're asking about design standards promulgated by what agency or organization?
Sure, I'll be more specific, like my grandfather says. I'll be more specific with my specificity. State Highway has their own design standards, where signs can be placed, the width of the highway, the width of the shoulders, the depth of the asphalt, the substrate, et cetera. If you want to have these crosswalks or crossings across those state highways, that has to be part of the design standard by State Highway. And if you don't have the design standards revised, nothing's going to change in the future because the plans that the engineers prepare will be rejected.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this answers your question, but let me try this and see if this is helpful. So the irony of this bill is what I'm actually doing. So the State Highway Administration established its own context-driven design standards. So you can go to the State Highways website, context-driven design standards, and those standards define things like in a, I'm trying to just make sure I get their names, suburban activity center. So that would be a certain level of pedestrian activity, a certain level of retail shops, a certain level of density. They have something called a traditional town center, right? So they've got 5 different contexts, and their standards say, in this context, here's the best practices. Here's what your crosswalk should look like. Here's how, here's what your, so it defines a lot of these things. Here's what your lane width ought to be. While it's not perfect, if we were actually implementing those standards, we would all be a lot safer. But what I have found over the last 4 years, since I've been actively involved in looking at their standards and looking at the roads in my district that where people are getting killed, is that those standards are not implemented. And so what this is literally saying is implement your own standards, implement them here in this way. Every time you're doing a capital project, implement your standards, and then take a look at the places you don't currently have projects and give us a report on what would it take to implement the pedestrian safety of your standards in these roadways, so that we can look at it and say, okay, that's gonna be 10 million, that's gonna be 20 million, that's gonna be 5 million, like, that's a priority, let's make it happen, or no, we could keep waiting. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know that part of it yet, because they have the standards and they repeatedly do work and don't implement them, so,
And that is a problem then.
yes.
Let me just add, the first paragraph of the bill, if you review it, says that the state's gonna, in any construction, post-construction, preservation, or maintenance project should be implementing these context-driven design changes. So that would involve, revising some existing roads and existing projects to make them better meet the kind of standards the delegate referring to.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for that question, Delegate Holmes, and thank you, Delegate Charkoudian, for explaining. I wanted to know, because I don't know what the design standards are. Do design standards include signage in different languages, if applicable for that area?
That is a really good question, and I actually don't know the answer to that. So, I mean, we could, I'll be looking it up, I'll send it to you when I see it. If you Google State Highway Administration context-driven guidelines, like it's, but, they should, if they don't.
Yeah, so it was just a question going
Yeah,
off of the
thank you.
Delegate Holmes. I had another one. I mean, I had that same one anyway, but I just wonder, because, there could be also language barriers, just like there are disabilities, regards to signages and wayfinding. So thank you so much.
Agreed.
I can die now. You didn't know an answer. Next question goes to Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess there's a first for everything now, isn't there? I really appreciated Delegate Holmes's question, and I just want to confirm my understanding. The bill is tying the requirement to the standards, so if they revise the standards in the future, then they're going to have to abide by those updated standards, correct?
Yes, yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Further questions? Apparently not. You're free to go. Thank you very much. That ends the public hearing on House Bill 70. It ends, I believe,